The wind was sharp that night, the kind of cold that slips through every layer of clothing and touches the skin like knives. The sky was dark, but the moon hung heavy, silver and broken by clouds drifting like torn sails. The waves below the cliff crashed against the rocks in endless fury, roaring like an angry beast. The cliff edge was not a place anyone should walk at night, not a place for family. Yet they were there, together, a man, a woman, and their son. The woman's heart beat fast, though she could not explain why. She looked at her son's face, half hidden in shadow, and felt something heavy in her chest. His eyes did not shine like before. His smile was gone. His steps were too calm, too measured, as if every move had been planned. Something about him made her afraid. I still remember that night. She would whisper to herself years later. But on that night, she could not whisper. She could only feel. The sea air stung her eyes as she held her husband's hand. He squeezed back, but even his grip felt uncertain, as if he too could sense the storm coming not from the sea, but from their own blood, their son, the boy they had raised, the boy they had trusted with their hearts. The path was narrow. Pebbles slid under their shoes and fell into the abyss below. The sound of stones tumbling into the black sea echoed like a warning. She shivered. The cliff had always frightened her, but never like this. Never with her son walking ahead, silent, not speaking, not turning back. "Why did you bring us here?" She finally asked, her voice carried away by the wind. Her son stopped. He turned, and for a moment the moonlight caught his face. His expression was unreadable. No warmth, no kindness. Only something cold, heavy, like stone. "You'll see," he said. His voice was flat, empty of emotion. Her husband looked at her, his jaw tight. They followed because he was their son, because family trusts, because love blinds. But the silence between them was no longer the silence of family. It was the silence of danger. The night seemed endless as they walked toward the edge. The smell of salt and seaweed rose from below, mixed with damp earth. She felt her legs weaken. Every instinct told her to turn back, to run. But how could she? This was her child then. It happened. It was not slow. It was not gentle. It was sudden, brutal, and final. He turned, both hands pushing with strength they never knew he had. The world spun as the woman screamed, her voice ripped apart by the wind. Her husband grabbed her arm, but they were falling together, tumbling into darkness. The cliff swallowed them. The sky vanished. The world was only black rock and rushing air. When they hit the slope, pain exploded through her body. She could not breathe. Her mouth filled with dust and blood. The crash of waves below grew louder, but she realized they had not reached the sea. They had struck a ledge, a cruel blessing that kept them alive but broken. She lay there, heart racing, body shaking. She wanted to scream, to cry, but then she felt her husband's hand. His lips brushed her ear. His voice was barely more than breath. "Don't move. Pretend we're gone." She froze. Tears filled her eyes. She understood. Above them, their son leaned over the edge, staring down into the darkness, searching for signs of life. Her heart broke. This was the child she had carried, the boy she had fed and cared for, the young man she had trusted. And now he was waiting to see them broken, waiting to be sure. The waves crashed. The wind howled. Her husband's grip tightened again, warning her not to flinch, not to make a sound. Minutes dragged like hours. Every muscle in her body screamed with pain, but fear was stronger. She could feel the blood on her face, the ache in her bones, but none of it mattered. Only silence mattered above. Their son crouched, his silhouette black against the moon. He stood still for a long time, then he moved. Slowly, carefully, he picked up a stone and dropped it. It fell near them, bounced and rolled into the sea below. He waited, listening. She closed her eyes, fighting the urge to gasp. Her husband whispered again, his words like a ghost in the night. "Stay still." He must believe. Her tears slipped down her cheeks, warm against the cold skin. She wanted to scream his name, to ask him why, to beg for the truth. But she could not. If she spoke, They would die. The sun finally stepped back. His figure blurred into the night. They heard his footsteps fade, soft against the earth, moving away from the edge. Relief came, but not peace. Because as she lay there, trembling and broken, she knew something was wrong. Something deeper than betrayal, deeper than fear. Their son had not acted out of sudden rage. His steps, his silence, his push, everything had been planned. And if he had planned this, then he would come back. The waves kept roaring below, pulling at the night. The cliffs seemed colder, sharper, hungrier. The woman clutched her husband's hand and pressed her face into the dirt. She could not speak. She could not move. She could only listen. The night was not over. The nightmare had only begun, and then footsteps, again, slow, careful, returning. The night wrapped around them like a coffin. The cliff, the sea, the broken rocks, they all pressed close, heavy with silence. Only the waves spoke, crashing far below. A cruel reminder that death waited at the bottom. The woman lay flat, her cheek against cold stone. Every breath hurt. Her ribs burned, her arms ached, and her legs felt like lead. Yet she did not dare to move. Her husband's words still echoed in her ears. Don't move. Pretend we're gone. She wanted to close her eyes and sink into nothingness, but fear held her awake. Above them, she could still hear faint sounds. Not the roar of the sea, not the howl of the wind, but something smaller. The crunch of earth. The shift of weight. Footsteps. Her son was still there. Her chest tightened. Her tears had dried on her face, leaving salty trails. The boy she had once rocked to sleep. The boy she had fed. The boy who had once held her hand with small fingers. He was watching, waiting. She remembered the first time he had run along the shore as a child. His laugh had been brighter than the waves, his smile pure as the sun. He had fallen, scraped his knee, and cried. She had rushed to him, holding him, kissing away the pain. How could that same child stand above her now, wishing her dead? Her body trembled, but she forced herself still. Her husband's hand squeezed hers once, a silent reminder that they must endure. Minutes crawled. The wind hissed through cracks in the cliff like whispers. Stones shifted, falling into the dark, echoing against unseen walls. Every sound felt like it carried their secret. She held her breath each time, terrified that he would hear. Then a sharp sound. A pebble struck near her arm. Her son had dropped another stone from above. Testing. Listening, her heart stopped. She wanted to gasp, to cry out, but her husband's grip held her steady. She could almost hear his silent command. Be stone. Be silent. Be gone. The pebble rolled, clicked, then tumbled into the sea. No reaction came from them. Only silence. Above, the footsteps shifted. He waited. Long minutes passed. Then slowly, the sound grew distant, fading into the night. Had he gone? The woman dared not believe it. The silence was heavy, too heavy. She knew he was clever. He could be hiding, waiting for the smallest sound, the smallest movement. He could return at any moment. The cold seeped deeper into her bones. She pressed closer to the ground, her body shaking from both pain and chill. She wanted to whisper to her husband to ask him what they should do, but fear sealed her lips. If their son still listened, one word could end them. The night stretched on. The sky above shifted as clouds passed the moon. Sometimes the world was darker than pitch. Other times, the pale light returned, casting ghostly shapes across the rocks. Each time the moonlight touched her son's shadow was burned in her memory. Tall, silent, patient. But now the shadow was gone. Her husband leaned close, his lips brushing her ear. His whisper was weaker this time, but still steady. We must wait. Not yet. She nodded faintly, her cheek still pressed to stone. As time passed, her mind wandered unbidden. She thought of the small house by the shore where they had raised him. She thought of nights when storms shook the roof, and he would crawl into their bed, afraid of the thunder. She thought of birthdays, of laughter, of moments that had once felt unbreakable. And then she thought of tonight, the push, the cold face, the silence. What had changed him? Why had their love turned to hate? Her chest ached, not only from the fall, but from the weight of grief. She wanted to believe this was a nightmare, that she would wake in the safety of their bed, her son sleeping peacefully in his room. But the stone under her body was real. The blood in her mouth was real. The betrayal was real. She shivered violently, and her husband pressed his hand harder over hers. His strength was fading too. She could feel it, but his will remained. The hours bled together. Darkness deepened and exhaustion pulled at her. She nearly slipped into sleep when a new sound cut the night. A crack. A twig. Her eyes flew open. The footsteps had returned. Slow. Careful. Closer. She bit her lip hard enough to taste blood. Her heart pounded so loud she feared it would give them away. The sound grew nearer, not from above, but from the side. From the slope leading down toward them. Her husband's breath caught. His hand trembled once, then steadied again, and then, through the shadows, a faint glow appeared. A light. A flashlight beam cutting across the darkness. Someone was searching the cliffside. The light cut through the night like a blade, thin and sharp, slicing across the rocks where they lay. The woman pressed her face deeper into the cold ground. Every muscle locked, her breath trapped in her chest. The silence between her and her husband was so heavy it felt like it could break with the smallest sound. The beam moved slowly, searching, sweeping from side to side as if the night itself was being peeled open. Her heart pounded in her ears, louder than the waves below, louder than the crunch of shoes against dirt. She could not see his face, but she knew it was him. She knew that beam was in her son's hand, and he was hunting them like prey. The thought twisted her stomach into knots and filled her mouth with the bitter taste of fear. The air was damp and salty, carrying the sharp smell of seaweed from below. Every second stretched into forever as the light moved closer, sliding across jagged rocks, illuminating the cracks and shadows. She prayed the beam would not find them. She prayed the cliff would protect them, that their stillness would fool his eyes. Her husband's hand tightened on hers, reminding her of the command he had given earlier. Don't move. Pretend we're gone. But as the light crept closer, she wondered how long they could hold this silence before terror betrayed them. The light stopped suddenly, freezing on the slope just a few feet away. She almost gasped. Her body screamed with pain, but the fear of being seen was worse. The figure above shifted, crouching low, scanning carefully. He seemed to be studying the ground, searching for broken patterns, marks, anything that would tell him where they had landed. The world shrank to that moment, the silence louder than thunder, the light blinding in its search. She imagined his eyes, cold and calculating, just as they had been when he turned and pushed them. The boy she once knew was gone. What remained was something else, something she could barely call human. And then, slowly, the beam moved away. It swept down toward the sea, hovered over the black waves, then climbed back to the cliff edge. Her son muttered something under his breath, too soft to catch. Then the light vanished. Darkness swallowed them again. The footsteps grew faint as he moved back up, retreating into the night. The sound of his boots faded, leaving only the endless crash of water below. For long minutes, neither of them moved. The woman felt tears running down her face, but she dared not wipe them. She tasted salt, not just from the sea, but from her own grief. When she finally turned her eyes toward her husband, she saw his face pale in the moonlight, his jaw clenched against pain. His leg was bent strangely, and she knew something was broken, but still he did not make a sound. His strength was not in his body now, but in his will, and that will had saved them. At last his lips brushed close to her ear. His whisper was ragged, barely more than air. We must move. Slowly, he will come again. She wanted to scream that she could not, that her body was too broken, her spirit too crushed. But she nodded instead because he was right. If they stayed, their son would find them. He had planned this night. He had pushed them. He would not rest until he was sure. Together, they began to crawl. The rocks were sharp, cutting into their palms, tearing their clothes, but they moved like shadows, dragging themselves inch by inch along the ledge. Each movement sent knives of pain through their bodies, but they swallowed the cries, forcing silence. The moonlight guided them in fragments, showing only parts of the path, leaving the rest hidden in darkness. The ground beneath them was unstable, loose with small stones that shifted and tumbled with the slightest pressure. Each time a pebble fell into the abyss, she froze, heart racing, praying the sound would not carry upward. They moved like this for what felt like hours, though the night had hardly passed. Their bodies shook with exhaustion, their breaths shallow, their hearts heavy. The woman's mind kept slipping back to memories she could not fight. She remembered her son's small hands holding hers when he was young. Remembered how he once cried when he thought he had lost her in a crowd. He had begged her never to leave him. How could that same boy now try to erase her forever? The thought tore her apart, but the pain of betrayal became fuel for her will to survive at last. The ledge widened, leading to a small slope covered in dirt and dry grass. They crawled onto it, their bodies trembling, their lungs burning. For the first time since the fall, the woman allowed herself a breath that was more than survival. It was fragile, shallow, but it was hers. She leaned against her husband, listening to the pounding of his heart. He was alive. They were alive. But then, breaking the silence, came a sound that froze her blood. A voice. It was their son's voice carried faintly on the wind. He was not alone. She heard the low hum of another voice answering, though she could not make out the words. Her husband stiffened beside her, his hand tightening again. Together they listened, straining to hear. The night seemed to hold its breath. And then it came clear, sharp, terrifying. Their son's voice filled with certainty, filled with ice. It's done. They won't bother us anymore. The woman's eyes widened. Her stomach dropped. He was speaking to someone, confirming what he had done, confirming their deaths. But what struck her even harder was the way he said us. He was not alone in this. Her husband leaned closer, his whisper rough, his breath shaking. He has help. Someone else knows. We must get away now. The woman nodded, but fear locked her body. The words replayed in her mind, each one like a knife. It's done. They won't bother us anymore. They had raised him, loved him, given everything for him. And now he spoke of them like they were nothing but obstacles. Like weeds cut from a garden. The footsteps moved again, fading into the distance, but the damage was done. They knew now that this was no accident, no sudden burst of anger. This was planned, and worse. It was not only their son's plan. The woman clutched her husband's arm as they crouched lower against the ground, hidden by the shadows of the cliff. Pain burned through her body, but the fear burned hotter. They could not stop now. They could not rest. If they stayed too long, the light would return. If they made a sound, the footsteps would come back. Their only chance was to move deeper into the dark, deeper into the unknown, away from the cliff that had nearly become their grave. So they crawled, inch by inch, step by painful step, into the night. But as they moved, the woman felt a new weight pressing on her chest. It was not only fear. It was not only pain. It was the question that would not leave her, the question that cut deeper than the rocks beneath her hands. Why? Why had he done this? Why had their son, their own flesh and blood, chosen to betray them? The night gave no answer. Only the waves, the wind, and the silence. And somewhere above, hidden by the shadows, her son still watched. The forest stood before them like a wall of shadows. Tall trees swaying against the silver sky, their branches clawing at the clouds. The woman and her husband dragged themselves away from the edge of the cliff, their bodies heavy with pain, their breaths shallow and ragged. The ground here was softer than the rocks, damp with fallen leaves that smelled of rain and earth. Yet the silence of the woods was no comfort. Every sound carried deeper. Every rustle felt like a warning. Every breath seemed too loud. The woman pressed her hand against her side, feeling the dull ache of bruised ribs, the sharp sting where stone had torn her skin. Blood had dried against her cheek, sticky and cold. She leaned against her husband, her weight half dragged by him, though his own leg was twisted, his face pale. He limped forward with the stubborn strength of a man who refused to fall, who refused to let go. She could see the pain in his eyes, but she could also see the fire that still burned there. He would not give up, not now, not when survival was all that remained. The woods swallowed them. The cliff faded behind, hidden by trees and shadows. The roar of the sea grew distant, replaced by the whisper of wind through branches. The creak of wood, the occasional cry of an owl. It should have been peaceful, but it was not. The night was alive with unseen eyes, with whispers that might not belong to the wind. The forest carried secrets, and tonight it carried theirs. The woman's thoughts twisted with each step. She saw flashes of her son's face as a boy, running through fields, laughing with dirt on his hands, shouting for her to watch him climb. She saw him at the table, bent over his books, his brow furrowed in concentration. She saw him on his birthdays, candles lighting his smile, his arms wrapping around her in joy. All those memories clashed with a cold look he had given on the cliff. The silence before he pushed, the calm way he dropped stones to test their depth. She could not fit them together. They were two different boys, two different lives. How had they lost him? Where had love turned to something else? Her husband's whisper broke the heavy silence. We must keep moving. They will come this way. He is not alone. She nodded, though fear weighed on her more than exhaustion. He was right. She had heard that second voice. Someone had answered him in the night. It's done. They won't bother us anymore. That was what he had said, and the way he had said it told her it was not the first time he had spoken those words. Whoever had been on the other side of that voice had been waiting. This was no sudden act of madness. This was planned, prepared, shared. The thought made her shiver even as the cold air seeped deeper into her bones. It was not only her son she feared now. It was whoever had joined him, whoever had encouraged him, whoever had promised him something that made betraying his own blood worth it. The trees grew thicker as they moved deeper. Roots twisted under their feet, threatening to trip them with every step. Their bodies screamed with pain, but they kept going, leaning on each other, breathing through clenched teeth. Every time a branch cracked underfoot, the woman flinched, convinced it would draw their son's attention. Every rustle of leaves made her heart race, imagining figures moving through the shadows, hunting them. They stopped once beneath an old oak tree, its trunk wide enough to hide them both. The woman pressed her back against the bark, trying to calm her shaking hands. Her husband leaned beside her, his breath heavy, his face streaked with sweat and blood. She reached out and touched his arm, grounding herself in the warmth of his skin, in the fact that he was still alive, but their rest was short. A sound drifted through the trees, faint, distant, but real. Voices. The woman stiffened, her blood turning cold. She grabbed her husband's sleeve, her eyes wide with terror. He nodded once, confirming what she already knew. They were not alone in the forest. Their son had returned, and this time he had brought someone with him. The voices grew clearer. Words carried faintly through the branches, though not enough to understand. Laughter, cruel and soft, mixed with the snap of twigs and the crunch of boots against leaves. The sound of two men moving slowly, deliberately. Searching, the woman pressed her hands over her mouth, holding in the scream that threatened to escape. She felt her husband's arms slip around her, steadying her, holding her against the tree. His whisper brushed against her ear, barely audible. Stay, don't move. The words repeated like a curse, like a promise. Don't move. Pretend we're gone? That command had already saved them once. But could it save them again? Light suddenly pierced the darkness. Not one beam now, but two. Flashlights swept through the trees, their circles of white breaking apart the shadows, gliding over roots, branches, trunks. They moved slowly, carefully, as if savoring the hunt. The beams twisted together, then apart, searching every corner. The woman's heart thundered in her chest. The light slid across the ground just a few feet away, grazing over fallen leaves, brushing past stones. Her breath stuck in her throat. She dared not close her eyes, dared not blink. Her body pressed hard against the tree, her husband's arm holding her still. The beams moved closer. One light swept high, glancing off branches. The other dipped low, crawling across the dirt like a predator's eye. Each time the light passed near, she felt as though it could burn straight through her. Exposing her in the open dot, the footsteps drew nearer. The voices whispered louder, and then one of the lights froze. The beam locked on the ground just ahead of them, illuminating broken leaves, pressed flat as if by hands or knees. The men stopped walking. The silence grew sharper, heavier. The woman's stomach dropped. They had found the trail. Her husband's hand clutched hers, hard enough to hurt. He did not speak, but she could feel the message in his grip. They had no choice. If the lights moved another step forward, if the men followed the marks on the ground, their hiding place would be revealed. The beams of light shifted. The voices grew louder. The footsteps turned toward them. The hunt was closing in. The forest seemed to hold its breath as the lights moved closer. The woman pressed her back so hard against the tree that the bark dug into her skin, but she did not move. Her husband's hand clamped around hers like a vice, squeezing tight enough that her fingers went numb. Yet she welcomed the pain. It reminded her that he was still alive, still with her. Their bodies shook with the effort of staying still, of making no sound. While the beams of light cut through the night like knives, the footsteps grew louder. Twigs cracked beneath boots. The voices were clearer now, low and rough, carrying in the cold night air. She could not hear every word, but she caught pieces, fragments that made her blood run cold. Check the ground. They didn't fall. Find them. Each word carried weight, sharp and heavy. These were not the words of a confused boy. These were the words of hunters. She wanted to scream, to cry, to call out his name and beg him to stop. But fear locked her throat. Her son was not the boy she once knew. Something darker lived inside him now, something she could not reach with love or memory. That thought tore her heart in two. The flashlight swept back and forth, searching every shadow, every root, every stone. One of the beams hovered dangerously close to their hiding place, brushing over the bark of the tree just inches from her face. She held her breath so long that her chest burned, her lungs begging for air. Her husband shifted slightly, pulling her closer, blocking her with his body as if he could shield her from the light. For a long moment, the beam lingered. Her heart pounded so hard she thought the sound would give them away. But then, slowly, the light moved again, sliding away through the trees, searching elsewhere. The footsteps continued, heading deeper into the woods. Relief flooded her body, so strong that her knees nearly gave out. She leaned against her husband, trembling with the weight of survival. But relief did not last. A sudden howl of laughter broke through the night. Her son's voice. It was not the laughter she remembered from his childhood. It was jagged, hollow, cruel. "You can't hide forever," he called, his words slicing through the forest. "I know you. I know how you think." The woman flinched as though struck. He did know them. He knew their habits, their fears, their weaknesses. He knew the way they moved, the places they would run, the spots where they would think they were safe. He had grown up with them, learned from them. He was not just their son anymore. He was their predator. Her husband leaned close to her ear, whispering with a voice so low she barely heard it. "We need to move. Quiet now." They slipped from the tree, their bodies stiff and sore, every step sending jolts of pain through their wounds. They moved like shadows, crouching low, careful not to break twigs or rustle leaves. Every noise seemed like thunder in the silence. They could still hear the footsteps and voices behind them, still see the glow of lights cutting through the forest. The deeper they went, the darker the woods became. The trees closed in tighter, branches clawing at their clothes, roots threatening to trip them. The ground was uneven, soft in places, wet in others. Their shoes sank into mud, and the cold seeped through their feet. But they kept moving, one step at a time, guided by desperation. The woman's thoughts were a storm. She wanted to understand why this was happening, why her son had turned against them. What had changed in him? Was it something she had missed, some sign she had ignored? Or had someone else poisoned his mind, twisting him into this stranger who hunted them like prey? The questions circled endlessly, but there were no answers, only fear. A sudden snap of a branch froze them in place. The lights behind them stopped moving. Silence stretched, long and heavy. Then a voice rose again, sharper this time. I heard something. This way. The beams of light turned, cutting through the trees, heading directly toward them. The woman's heart raced. Her husband grabbed her hand and pulled her forward, faster now, stumbling through the undergrowth. Pain shot through her side with every step, but she did not stop. Behind them, the lights grew brighter, chasing them. And the sound of footsteps quickened. The forest was alive with chaos, branches snapping, leaves crunching, voices shouting, lights flashing. The woman's breaths came in ragged gasps, her chest aching, her body screaming for rest. But fear drove her forward. Fear of being caught. Fear of seeing her son's face again, twisted and cruel. Fear of what he might do if he caught them. They stumbled into a clearing. The trees parting to reveal a patch of open ground bathed in pale moonlight. For a moment, the woman froze, her body exposed under the silver glow. She felt naked, vulnerable, as if the moon itself had betrayed her. Her husband dragged her forward across the clearing, toward the shadows on the other side. But before they reached the trees again, a voice rang out, loud and clear. There! The beams of light burst into the clearing, blinding them. The woman's scream tore from her throat before she could stop it. The clearing exploded with light. Beams cut across the open ground, turning the night into a white prison. The woman froze like a hunted animal caught in the snare, her heart hammering so violently that she thought it would tear through her chest. For one terrible second, she saw his face. Her son's face. The light struck his eyes, and they gleamed not with love, not with mercy, but with fire. A cruel, burning fire that did not belong to the boy she had raised. Her husband reacted first. He yanked her arm hard, pulling her toward the far side of the clearing. Their legs stumbled into a desperate run, their feet pounding the earth, breathless gasps tearing from their lungs. Behind them came the voices, sharp and urgent, followed by the crash of boots breaking through branches. They were no longer shadows, moving in silence. They were prey being hunted in the open. The moon hung above them, huge and silver, casting long shadows that stretched across the clearing. The ground was rough, uneven with rocks and patches of grass. The woman nearly fell twice, her weakened body refusing to obey, but her husband held her up, dragging her forward. Pain tore through her side with every step, but she bit her lip until blood filled her mouth. She would not stop. She could not stop that the voices behind them grew louder. She heard laughter again as laughter. Run, he shouted, his voice carried on the night air. Run, if you want. I'll find you. I always do. His words cut into her like knives. He knew their weakness. He had studied their steps since he was a child. He knew how they moved, how they thought, where they would hide. Another voice joined his, deeper, rougher, not her son. Someone else? Don't let them reach the trees. Cut them off. The command sent a fresh wave of terror through her. There was someone with him. Not only was her son hunting them, but he had brought another. A stranger. A partner. Her mind spun with questions even as her body stumbled forward. Who was he? Why was he helping? Why would her son ally with someone like this? Was this man the one who had poisoned his heart, who had turned him against them? The thought made her sick, but there was no time for answers, only for survival. They reached the edge of the clearing just as the light swept closer. Branches clawed at them as they plunged into the woods again, the shadows closing around them like a cloak. The darkness gave them hope, but it also hid dangers. Roots snatched at their feet, stones cut their skin, low branches whipped their faces. Yet they pressed on, driven by terror. The forest became a blur of movement. Breathless gasps. The crunch of leaves underfoot. The flash of lights weaving through the trees behind them. Shouts filled the night, echoing from every direction, making it impossible to know how close the hunters were. Sometimes the beams of light appeared to the left, sometimes to the right, sometimes directly behind. Like ghosts flickering in and out of existence, the woman's strength began to fail. Her legs shook, her chest burned, and every step felt like dragging a mountain. She wanted to collapse, to curl into the dirt and vanish. But her husband's grip kept her upright, his whispered words forcing her forward. Keep going. Don't stop. Don't give them the chance. She wanted to believe him, to trust his strength, but fear whispered other things. What if they were caught? What if their son truly wanted them dead? What if this was the last night they would ever see the world? Then, through the chaos, something strange happened. A single voice cut through the shouting. Her son's voice. Calm, steady, almost gentle. "Mother," he called. "Father, please stop. You don't have to run. Come back to me." The words froze her blood. She stumbled, her feet faltering. For a moment, her heart almost believed him. It was the voice of her boy again, the one she had known, the one who once held her hand when storms frightened him. But then she remembered the shove, the cliff, the cold eyes. That voice was a mask. A trapped at her husband pulled her harder, his whisper fierce in her ear. "Don't listen. It's not him anymore." Tears blurred her vision, but she forced her legs to keep moving. Behind them, the voices grew sharper again, the mask of kindness gone, replaced with anger. "You can't run forever." Her son shouted. The deeper voice echoed with rage. "Find them." The forest thinned suddenly, the trees parting to reveal another slope. The ground dropped away steeply, disappearing into darkness. The woman's steps faltered as she realized there was nowhere to go. Behind them, the lights were closing in. Ahead of them, the drop loomed, steep and dangerous. Her husband stood at the edge, breathing hard, his eyes darting back and forth. For a moment, he looked like a man trapped between fire and water, knowing that either choice could kill them. His hand tightened around hers, his breath ragged in the night. And then another light appeared. Not from behind, not from the hunters, but from below the slope. A faint glow rising slowly, as if someone else was climbing up from the darkness beneath them. The woman's heart froze. Were they surrounded? The faint glow rose steadily from the darkness below the slope, flickering as it cut through the shadows. At first it seemed unreal, like a ghostly lantern drifting upward, carried by the night itself. But then, as it came closer, the shape of a man appeared. He was climbing the steep ground with steady movements, a light strapped to his chest, his face hidden by shadow. Each step brought him closer to the terrified couple, blocking the only way down. The woman's breath caught in her throat. She pressed closer to her husband, her hand clutching his arm with desperate strength. Behind them, the shouts of the hunters grew louder, the beams of flashlights slicing through the trees as they closed in. Ahead of them, the stranger continued to climb, his head lifting slowly, as if he already knew who waited above. The couple was trapped. The man reached the top and stood tall, his frame blocking the slope. The light on his chest burned bright now, illuminating his face for the first time. It was a face the woman had never seen before, rough and scarred, eyes sharp and cold like steel. He looked like someone who had lived a life of violence, a man who had walked through shadows and carried death in his hands. But the way he looked at them was not the look of a stranger. It was the look of someone who had been waiting. "Hello," he said softly, his voice low, carrying a strange calm. "You've made it far." The woman's stomach twisted. She wanted to ask who he was, why he was here, what he wanted. But her husband spoke first, his voice shaking with both rage and fear. "Who are you?" The man's lips curved into the smallest smile, but his eyes stayed cold. "A friend to your son," he answered simply. The words hit the woman like a stone to the chest. A friend? This man was no stranger who had stumbled upon them. He was with their son. He was part of this. He was part of the betrayal. The sound of footsteps and voices drew closer from behind. The lights were almost at their backs now, only moments away from breaking through the trees into the clearing. The couple had nowhere left to run. They were caught between their son's hunting party and this scarred man, who stood before them with his steady gaze, The woman's voice cracked as she finally spoke, her fear spilling out in broken words. Why? Why are you helping him? He's our son. The man tilted his head slightly, his expression unreadable. Because he is stronger than you know, he said. Because he chose a path that you would never understand. And because sometimes blood must be cut away for new life to grow. The words chilled her to the bone. They were spoken with certainty, with belief. As if this betrayal was not only justified, but necessary. Her husband stepped forward, placing himself between her and the man, his voice sharp now, filled with fury. Stay away from her. Stay away from us. The scarred man did not move. He only studied them quietly, his gaze lingering on the woman for a long moment before he spoke again. You don't see it yet, do you? He murmured. This is not only about you. It never was, for she could ask what he meant before her mind could piece together the hidden meaning in his words. The lights behind them burst into the clearing. The woman spun, blinded by the sudden brightness. Her son's voice rang out, strong and clear. There they are. The beams locked on them, trapping them in light like insects under glass. The scarred man did not flinch. He only stepped aside slightly, giving space for her son to appear. And then, out of the shadows, her boy came. He looked different now, standing tall in the blaze of light, his face hardened, his eyes colder than she had ever seen. He walked with confidence, like someone who already owned the ground he stepped on. He stopped only a few feet away, his gaze fixed on them. For a long moment, no one spoke. Only the sea roared in the distance, and the forest whispered in the wind. Then he smiled. It was not the smile of her child. It was sharp, cruel, filled with something dark. Mother, father, he said softly, why do you run from me? The woman's legs trembled, her body shaking with both terror and grief. Her husband stood rigid beside her, his fists clenched, his jaw tight. The scarred man shifted his weight, his eyes glinting as though waiting for something, and in that heavy silence, the woman understood one terrible truth. They were no longer running from their son. They were standing before the enemy he had become. The forest felt suffocating, heavy with shadows, as the woman and her husband faced their son and the scarred stranger. The moonlight painted everything in silver and black, exaggerating the lines of the trees, the rough edges of the rocks, and the trembling of their own hands. The woman could feel every pulse in her chest, every beat hammering like a drum of warning. Their son stood only a few feet away, his face cold, but there was a strange pride in the way he held himself, like a hunter surveying prey that he knew could not escape. The scarred man stood slightly behind him, arms crossed, calm and unmoving. His presence was a shadow that seemed to draw the light in, making the couple feel smaller, weaker. He was silent, watching, waiting, like a predator who had already claimed victory even before the battle began. The woman tried to speak, but her voice failed her at first. Finally, she whispered, trembling, Why? Why did you do this? Why? Push us? Her son's eyes glimmered in the pale light. You never understood me, he said softly, almost like he was recalling a memory rather than confessing a plan. You tried to control me, to protect me from the world. But I am not a child anymore. I can see things you cannot. I can do what you will never do. The words cut like knives. Her husband stepped forward, voice low but sharp with anger. We raised you, we loved you, and this is how you repay us. Their son's expression did not waver. Repay? No, I am freeing myself, he said, and freeing the world from the weaknesses you cling to. You are too soft, too weak. You were never enough. The woman shook her head, tears streaming down her face. She could not understand, could not believe. You are my son, my child. How can you be like this? The scarred man's voice interrupted. Calm, like a teacher correcting a student, because he had to see the truth. Some things must be broken to rebuild. Some ties must be cut for him to survive. Her husband's fists clenched. Survive. By killing your own parents. By making monsters of yourselves. The son's lips twitched into a faint, cruel smile. You don't see it yet. One day you will understand. But not tonight. The woman's chest tightened, panic mixing with grief. She took a small step forward, her voice desperate. We love you. We would never stop loving you. Please, please, come back with us. He laughed, low and hollow. The sound reverberated through the trees, sharp and cruel. Back with you. That world is gone. That world ended when you pushed me too far, when you held me too tight. Do you think love can fix this? You think it can undo what I've seen? The scarred man's eyes flickered with something unreadable. It is too late for love, he said. Tonight, there is only choice. Fight or disappear. The woman's husband shook his head. We will never give up on you, he said fiercely. Even if you hate us, even if you try to destroy us. We are your family. You will not win this. The son's face hardened. Then you leave me no choice, he whispered. His hand brushed the strap of the flashlight at his side, signaling the scarred man with a subtle movement. The lights behind them moved again. The hunters had caught up. Their son had trapped them completely, and the forest seemed to close in tighter, every tree, every shadow a wall around them. The woman pressed herself against her husband, shaking with fear, trying to make sense of what was happening. How could this be real? How could the child they raised become a predator against them? But before she could speak, a strange sound echoed from above a branch, snapping sharply, and a figure appeared in the trees. The scarred man's eyes widened slightly, though he remained calm. You didn't expect this? He said quietly, almost to himself. The figure dropped from the tree, landing lightly on the ground. The couple could barely see the face, hidden by shadows, but there was an aura of power, of control around them. The hunters stopped, confused, caught between the two forces, now in the forest. Their son looked up, startled for a moment, but his expression quickly turned to anger. Who are you? He demanded. The newcomer stepped forward, voice strong and calm. Someone who refuses to let this end in death, they said. You may think you have one, but tonight will prove who truly survives. The couple's hearts pounded in unison. The hunters, their son, and the scarred man paused, uncertainty flickering in the cold night. The forest felt like it was holding its breath. The woman's husband whispered to her, voice shaking. We don't know who that is, but maybe this is our chance. The son's face twisted with rage. No one stops me, he shouted. The air seemed to vibrate with the power behind the words. The newcomer moved closer, a calm presence in the storm of chaos. No one, they repeated, but the truth always finds a way. The son's ally, the scarred man, shifted his stance, suddenly unsure, as if he had never expected interference. The balance of power began to tilt subtly but unmistakably. And then, in that heavy, tense silence, the woman realized something. She could feel it in her chest, a spark of hope that had been buried under fear and pain for so long. Perhaps, after all this darkness, they still had a chance not only to survive, but to face the son they once knew and bring him back. Or at least stop the destruction he had begun. But before they could move, before a single step could be taken, the forest erupted again, flashlights, shouting, and the sound of branches breaking. The sun lunged toward them, wild and desperate, as the newcomer stepped into his path. The night exploded into chaos. The forest trembled with movement and sound. Flashlights cut through the darkness like blades, and every shadow seemed to jump, alive with danger. The woman and her husband stood frozen for a moment, pressed together. As the newcomer confronted the scarred man and their son, every breath they took was ragged, every heartbeat pounding in their ears like a warning drum. The night was no longer silent, was a battlefield waiting to erupt. Their son's face was twisted with anger and confusion. He had expected complete obedience from his ally, from the world, from his parents, but the newcomer disrupted that certainty. The scarred man hesitated just for a moment, and it was enough. That flicker of doubt gave the parents a spark of hope they hadn't dared to feel in hours, maybe even days. But the danger was far from over. Their son still radiated power, unpredictability, and fury, and every step he took toward them reminded them that one wrong move could mean death. The newcomer moved with calm precision, stepping into the path between the son and the couple. "Stop this," they said, voice steady and commanding. "You are not alone in this world. Violence is not the only choice." The son laughed, a cruel, jagged sound that echoed through the trees. "You think you can teach me anything? I am beyond your lessons. I have seen the truth, and I will not be chained by weakness." The scarred man shifted, uncertain now, his loyalty to the son cracking like old wood. He may not be ready," the man muttered, almost to himself, "but you cannot stop what has begun." The woman's husband took a small step forward, his voice raw with emotion. "You are still our son. You don't have to do this. There is still a chance to come back, to leave all this behind." For the first time, something flickered in the boy's eyes, doubt, hesitation, a shadow of the child he once had been. The wind rustled the trees, carrying the sound of distant water, a reminder of the cliff, the danger they had already survived. The forest seemed to pause, as if waiting for a single decision that could change everything. The newcomer's presence was magnetic, holding attention, a calm center in the chaos. "You've been manipulated," they said, stepping closer. "Your anger, your hatred, it is not your own. Look at what you have done and ask yourself if this is truly what you want. Ask yourself if this path leads to life or only to more death." The son's hand twitched at his side, ready to lash out, but hesitation slowed him. For a brief, fleeting moment, he remembered the mother who had held him when he was scared, the father who had fought to keep him safe, the warmth and safety of a home that now seemed impossibly far away. The memories crashed into him, fighting against the darkness that had claimed his heart. But the scarred man whispered urgently in his ear, a reminder of power, control, and the choice they had made together. "Do not falter. Take what is yours. Show them strength. Show them the price of weakness." The boy's face contorted, torn between loyalty and fear, love and anger. He glanced at the couple, at their fearful, desperate eyes, at the faces that had loved him unconditionally. Then he looked at the newcomer, and for a moment he looked truly human again, just a boy on the edge of a cliff, caught between darkness and light. The woman's heart raced. She stepped forward slightly, voice trembling, raw with hope and fear. "Please, we can help you. You don't have to be like this. You can still come back to us." The son's eyes widened, and he staggered, as if the weight of his actions finally hit him. The forest seemed to hold its breath. The flashlights danced, catching glimmers of fear and anger, of hesitation and regret. And then, without warning, the scarred man lunged, trying to pull the boy back toward darkness, toward the path he had chosen. But the boy twisted violently, breaking free, and stumbled toward the parents. The newcomer acted instantly, stepping between them once more. Ready to stop the collision of family and betrayal, time seemed to stretch. The son's hand reached toward them, eyes filled with a storm of emotion, anger, fear, confusion, and a flicker of the boy he once had been. And then, a deafening sound split the night. The branches above cracked, and something heavy fell from the trees, crashing between the son and the newcomer, separating them. The impact sent everyone staggering, dust and leaves flying in every direction. The forest fell into sudden silence. Even the hunters in the distance paused, unsure of what had just happened. The woman's chest heaved. Her husband held her tighter, both of them trembling. She looked up, heart hammering, and saw the newcomer staring at the fallen figure above them. "We are running out of time," they said. Their voice carried urgency, warning, and a strange note of fear. The son staggered, momentarily dazed while the scarred man crouched low, calculating his next move. The woman realized, with a chill running down her spine, that this night was far from over. The turning point had come, yes, but it had not yet ended. Every secret, every betrayal, every truth was still waiting to be revealed. And the next move could either save them or destroy them completely. The forest seemed to hold its breath as the dust settled. The fallen branch lying heavy across the clearing. The boy staggered to his feet, blinking in the moonlight, his chest heaving. The scarred man froze, calculating, weighing every possible move. The newcomer stepped forward cautiously, eyes sharp. Their presence calm yet commanding in the chaos. The woman and her husband clung to each other, hearts pounding, staring at their son, for the first time since that terrifying push off the cliff. The child they had raised looked small and human again, fragile even. The power, the anger, the cruelty that had twisted him now wavered in the moonlight. She wanted to rush to him, to hold him, but fear pinned her to the spot. Her husband whispered in her ear, voice trembling yet steady, "This is it. The moment everything changes." The boy's gaze flicked between his parents and the newcomer. Confusion and doubt flickered across his face. I don't know anymore," he muttered, voice breaking. "I thought I had to. I thought I had to be strong to survive." The newcomer took a careful step forward. Strength isn't killing your own family. Survival isn't betrayal. You've been misled and you've been hurt, but this is your chance to choose differently. The scarred man stepped back, lips pressed tight, realizing his influence was failing. His calm facade wavered. "You still have time to prove loyalty," he whispered to the boy, but the words sounded empty now. The woman stepped forward, trembling, tears streaming down her cheeks. "We are your family," she said, voice breaking with emotion. "We love you. Nothing can change that. Come back to us. We can help you find your way." For a long moment, the boy looked at her, silent, his chest rising and falling rapidly. Memories of love, warmth, and safety clashed violently with the anger and pride that had consumed him. His knees shook and he dropped his gaze to the ground. Then a small, almost inaudible sigh escaped him. I'm sorry," he whispered, voice raw. The words were fragile, trembling. But they carried a weight that the forest seemed to recognize. The scarred man let out a soft curse under his breath, stepping aside. "So be it," he muttered, retreating into the shadows. Leaving the boy alone with his parents, the newcomer's eyes softened and they nodded to the couple. "It's over for now, but keep watch. He will need guidance. He is not yet healed." The woman rushed forward, embracing her son tightly, feeling the tremor of his body against hers. He did not resist, only clung back, shivering, crying quietly for the first time in years. Her husband joined, wrapping them both in a protective hold. The forest, once menacing, now felt alive with relief, the wind rustling softly through the trees as if breathing alongside them. The couple looked at each other, exhaustion and gratitude mingling in their eyes. The nightmare was ending, but the scars would remain. They had survived betrayal, danger, and fear. And now the most important task lay ahead, healing their broken family. The boy pulled back slightly, his eyes still haunted, yet clearer than before. I don't want to hurt you again," he said, voice quiet but firm. I want to change." The woman smiled through her tears, shaking her head. "We'll get through this together, always." The forest was calm now. The hunters had vanished into the shadows. The scarred man was gone. Only the trio remained, battered but alive, bound together by love, fear, and the hard lessons of that terrifying night, as dawn crept over the horizon, painting the sky in soft pink and gold. The woman whispered softly, "I still remember that night, and I will never forget the fear, the pain, but also the hope that brought us back together." Her husband nodded, holding her hand. "We survived, and we will survive anything, as long as we hold on to each other." The boy looked at them, a fragile smile forming. For the first time, he felt something like relief, like the weight of darkness had lifted, if only a little. The road ahead would be difficult, full of trust to rebuild and fears to overcome. But they were together, and that was all that mattered. The woman turned to the forest, the place that had been both prison and battlefield. She took a deep breath and said softly, almost to herself, "We are stronger than fear, stronger than betrayal. And love always finds a way." The family stepped forward together, leaving the shadows behind. The night had ended. The reckoning had come. And in its wake, hope had been born again. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Remember, even in the darkest moments, hope and love can guide us back to the light.